Scotland, the land that time forgot, emerges from the Atlantic like a half-remembered dream. Its peaks wrapped in mist that seems to breathe rather than drift. At first glance, this appears to be a landscape shaped by centuries of quiet erosion. But beneath these moors and mountains lies evidence of something far more violent. Forces powerful enough to split continents and push ancient seabeds toward the sky. The rocks of the Northern Highlands rank among the oldest exposed surfaces on Earth. Fragments of a world that existed nearly 3 billion years before the first forests took root. Every glen, every sea loch, every ridge that tears through low cloud carries the memory of that primordial violence. And without understanding these hidden forces, the famous castles, the standing stones, and the wild coastlines lose the deeper story that connects them. This is a nation of 790 scattered islands, of Gaelic still spoken in remote villages, of stone circles older than the pyramids standing silent on windswept headlands. From the fishing harbours of the Outer Hebrides to the volcanic plug beneath Edinburgh Castle, every corner of Scotland whispers of ages that most travellers never pause to hear. Once these patterns come into view, the entire landscape begins to reveal a story that has been hiding in plain sight for millennia. We begin our journey in the far north, where one archipelago holds secrets older than memory itself. The Orkney Islands rise from the Northern Sea, where the Atlantic meets the North Sea in a constant churning of currents. These low-lying islands carry few trees, their windswept grasslands rolling toward cliffs that drop into cold waters. Yet beneath this spare landscape, generations of farmers and fishermen built a civilization that would outlast empires. The Ring of Brodgar stands on a narrow strip of land between two lochs, its stones arranged in a perfect circle against the Orkney sky. 27 megaliths remain upright today, survivors from an original 60 that once formed this sacred space. Each stone was quarried from different parts of the islands and dragged here nearly 5,000 years ago. The effort required suggests a purpose beyond simple gathering, a meaning that still escapes complete understanding. Walking among these weathered pillars, the scale of ancient ambition becomes clear. Some stones tower over 4 meters tall, their surfaces scarred by millennia of wind and rain. The circle measures 104 meters across, making it one of the largest stone rings in Britain. On summer evenings, the setting sun casts long shadows across the heather, and the stones seem to mark time in ways that clocks cannot measure. This place existed when the pyramids were mere ideas, when bronze had not yet reached these shores, when the world was shaped by hands that left no written record of their dreams. Leaving the stone circles of Orkney behind, we travel southeast to where Scotland meets the cold waters of the North Sea. Aberdeen rises from the coastline like a city carved from winter light. Known as the Granite City, its buildings shimmer with a silvery grey that shifts between soft pewter and bright silver depending on the weather. This is a place where stone and sea have shaped both landscape and character for centuries. The granite that gives Aberdeen its name was quarried from nearby Rubislaw, once the largest man-made hole in Europe. For over 200 years, this single quarry supplied the building blocks of an entire city. Walking through Union Street, the main artery of the city centre, and the uniformity of the stone creates an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in Britain. When sunlight breaks through the clouds, the mica flecks embedded in the granite catch the light and the whole city seems to glow. Old Aberdeen stands apart from the commercial centre, a medieval village preserved within the modern city. Cobblestone streets wind past St. Machars Cathedral, whose twin spires have watched over this corner of Scotland since the 12th century. The University of Aberdeen, founded in 1495, adds a scholarly quietness to these ancient lanes. Here, time moves at a different pace, measured in academic terms, and Sunday church bells rather than the rhythms of commerce and industry. South of Aberdeen's granite streets, those same ancient forces find their most dramatic expression along the northeastern coast, where the land drops away in sheer cliffs battered by the North Sea. Here, on a rocky headland that juts into the grey waters, stands Dunnottar Castle. Its ruined walls rise from a flat-topped promontory, separated from the mainland by a narrow chasm carved by millennia of relentless waves. The approach reveals why this site has drawn defenders for over 1,000 years. The fortress occupies nearly 4 acres of windswept rock, accessible only by a steep path that descends into a ravine before climbing again to the gatehouse. Vikings tested these defenses in the 9th century. William Wallace seized the stronghold in 1297. Mary, Queen of Scots, walked these grounds, and later, Scottish crown jewels hid here from Cromwell's advancing army. The stones hold centuries of siege and sanctuary within their weathered faces. Today, the castle stands open to the sky. Its great hall and chapel reduced to elegant shells that frame the churning sea beyond. Visitors wander through doorways that once witnessed coronations and conspiracies. The tower house still climbs several stories, offering views across waters where fishing boats trace paths their ancestors followed for generations. In certain light, when fog rolls across the headland and the ruins seem to drift between the present day and some older, wilder age that Scotland has never quite left behind. Following the coastline south from Dunnottar's windswept ruins, we arrive where the River Tay meets the North Sea, at a city that has reinvented itself while honouring its past. Dundee sits along Scotland's eastern coast, shaped by waters that once carried whaling ships to Arctic hunting grounds. This compact city wears its industrial heritage openly, its waterfront now transformed into something unexpected. Where jute mills and shipyards once dominated, cultural ambition has taken root. The city earned its wealth through three trades that locals still remember by name: jam and journalism. Factories processed raw fiber from India into rope and canvas that sailed across every ocean. Marmalade production began here when a Spanish ship arrived with bitter oranges that a local grocer's wife transformed into breakfast preserves. Publishing houses printed newspapers and comics that shaped generations of British readers. These industries have faded, yet their memory lingers in converted warehouses and street names. Modern Dundee has turned toward design and discovery with striking confidence. The Victoria and Albert Museum opened a Scottish outpost here, its angular building jutting over the waterfront like the prow of a ship frozen in concrete. Nearby, the restored RSS Discovery waits at anchor. The vessel that carried Scott and Shackleton toward Antarctica over a century ago. Students from the local university fill cafes and galleries, bringing energy to streets that Victorian merchants would barely recognize today. Just down the coast from Dundee's reinvented waterfront, the town of St Andrews rises from the Kingdom of Fife. This small settlement perches on a rocky promontory where the North Sea meets fertile farmland. Three main streets converge toward ruins that once commanded spiritual authority across an entire nation. The salt air carries echoes of pilgrims, scholars, and kings who walked these same cobblestones centuries ago. St Andrew's Cathedral stands in magnificent decay along the eastern cliffs. Founded in 1160, it grew to become the largest church ever built in Scotland. For 300 years, this was the religious heart of the nation, drawing faithful travelers from across medieval Europe. Now only skeletal walls and a single square tower remain. Their weathered stones framing views of the grey sea beyond. The 12th century St. Rule's Tower still permits those willing to climb its narrow spiral stairs a commanding view of the town below. West of the cathedral grounds, the old course stretches along the shoreline in rumpled links land. Golf has been played on this ground since the early 1400s, making it the oldest course in the world. The landscape appears almost accidental, shaped more by grazing sheep and coastal winds than human design. Yet every bunker and undulation here has influenced how the game developed across 5 centuries. The 18th hole returns players directly into town, where the grey stone clubhouse watches over the final approach like a stern but welcoming guardian. The volcanic forces that would later shape Edinburgh's famous Castle Rock left another dramatic monument rising from the waters of the Firth of Forth. Bass Rock stands just over a mile off the East Lothian coast, a sheer-sided volcanic plug that climbs more than 100 meters above the waves. From the mainland, it appears as a pale dome against the horizon. Its surface whitened not by snow, but by the countless birds that claim it as home. This fortress of stone has witnessed human history unfold along the Scottish shoreline for thousands of years. The gannet colony that blankets Bass Rock represents one of the natural world's most remarkable gatherings. More than 150,000 of these seabirds return each year to nest on the rock's steep slopes and ledges. Their white plumage and golden-crowned heads transform the dark volcanic surface into something resembling a snow-capped peak during breeding season. The noise alone carries across the water, a constant chorus of calls that sailors have heard for centuries. The volcanic island formation itself tells a story written 320 million years ago. Molten rock forced its way toward the surface, then cooled and hardened deep underground. Over countless ages, softer surrounding stone wore away, leaving this resistant plug standing alone against the sea. The same geological process created the chain of volcanic remnants that dot this coastline, silent witnesses to the ancient fires that once burned beneath Scotland. Turning inland from the seabird colonies of Bass Rock, we travel south to the Scottish borders, where a different kind of history rises from the earth. Melrose Abbey stands in the gentle valley of the River Tweed, its red sandstone walls still reaching toward the sky after 7 centuries. Founded by Cistercian monks in 1136, this was once among the wealthiest and most influential monasteries in all of Scotland. Today, its graceful ruins speak of both spiritual devotion and the violent tides that swept through these borderlands. The Gothic architecture here achieved a refinement rarely seen this far north. Delicate stone tracery still frames empty windows, where colored glass once filtered the light. Flying buttresses support walls that master craftsmen carved with images of saints, dragons, and a famous bagpipe-playing pig. Walking among these arches, the skill of medieval stonemasons becomes apparent in every surviving detail. Beneath the abbey floor rests a lead casket containing what tradition holds to be the heart of Robert the Bruce, the warrior king who secured Scottish independence at Bannockburn in 1314, wished for his heart to be carried on crusade after his death. When that journey ended in Spain, the heart returned home and found its final rest here among the monks who had prayed for the kingdom through its darkest hours. A simple marker in the chapter house now honors this relic of Scottish sovereignty, a quiet testament to a king whose legend still stirs the national imagination. From the borders, we turn westward toward the coast, where one island holds a particular place in the hearts of those who know it well. The Isle of Arran rises from the Firth of Clyde like a miniature Scotland, its northern peaks jagged and wild, while its southern half rolls with gentler farmland. Locals call it Scotland in miniature, and the name fits. Within 32 kilometers, the landscape shifts from granite mountains to sandy beaches to ancient standing stones. Nestled in the village of Loch Lomond on the island's northern tip sits the Arran distillery. Founded in 1995, it became the first legal whiskey distillery on the island in over 150 years. The location was chosen with purpose. Clean mountain water flows down from the surrounding peaks, filtered through ancient granite before reaching the stills. This water carries minerals deposited millions of years ago, lending a distinct character to every drop produced here. The distillery operates without chill filtration or artificial coloring, methods that strip flavor from many commercial whiskies. Copper pot stills work in the traditional manner, their shapes carefully designed to produce a lighter, more delicate spirit. Visitors walking through the production halls can watch this process unfold. From the mashing of malted barley to the slow maturation in oak casks. The sea air that drifts through the warehouse doors leaves its own mark on the aging whiskey. A subtle salinity that speaks of the island's maritime heritage. Further out into the Hebrides, another island stands apart, where Atlantic winds carry something unmistakable on the air. The Isle of Islay rises from the inner Hebrides with a character all its own. Peat bogs stretch across its interior like dark blankets laid over ancient stone. This small island, barely 25 miles across, has become sacred ground for those who understand what patience and tradition can create. The whiskey distilleries of Islay have shaped this island's identity for generations beyond counting. 9 working distilleries dot the coastline and interior, each drawing water from local springs that filter through layers of peat and rock. The malting floors and copper stills follow methods passed down through families who never left these shores. Smoke from burning peat drifts across the warehouses, where casks rest for years in the salt-tinged air. What emerges carries the taste of this place, of seaweed and heather, and something older still. Beyond the distillery walls, coastal beaches reveal another face of Islay entirely. White sands curve along sheltered bays, where Atlantic swells break into gentle foam. The singing sands at Ardnave make sounds underfoot that locals have wondered about for centuries. Rocky headlands give way to stretches of shoreline, where seals watch from the waves. Walking these beaches at low tide, the modern world feels impossibly distant. Replaced by the rhythm of water meeting land, as it has since the island first emerged from the sea. Yet before we venture deeper into those remote highlands, our path leads first to Scotland's largest city, Glasgow. Built along the banks of a river that once carried the wealth of empire, this industrial giant rose from humble medieval beginnings. Where ancient Britons once forded shallow waters, a great city now stands with roots reaching back over 1,500 years. Glasgow's story begins not with factories or shipyards, but with a saint and a simple wooden church. St. Mungo's Cathedral anchors the city's spiritual heart on a hill where the patron saint himself once preached. This medieval masterpiece survived the Protestant Reformation, when so many Scottish churches fell to zealous crowds. Its stone walls have absorbed the prayers of countless generations since the 12th century. Below the main floor, the lower church holds St. Mungo's tomb in a forest of pillars that seems to belong to another age entirely. Rising behind the cathedral, the necropolis crowns a steep hill with monuments to Victorian ambition and mortality. Wealthy merchants and industrialists built elaborate tombs here, each trying to outdo the next in grandeur. Winding paths climb past Egyptian vaults, Greek temples, and Gothic spires, all carved from weathered stone. From the summit, the entire city spreads below. A reminder that Glasgow's dead still watch over the living. The River Clyde flows through Glasgow like a thread connecting past to present. These waters once launched more ships than any river on Earth. Vessels that sailed to every corner of the globe. Cranes that built ocean liners now stand as monuments along regenerated waterfronts. The river that made Glasgow an industrial powerhouse continues to shape its identity, carrying the city forward even as it remembers what came before. "40 miles east of Glasgow, a volcanic plug crowned by an ancient fortress rises into view, watching over Scotland's capital as it has for nearly 1,000 years. Edinburgh sits where ancient geology meets human ambition. A city built upon and around the remnants of an extinct volcano. 7 hills define its shape, though one dominates all others. Here, where molten rock once pushed toward the surface 350 million years ago, a nation's story found its stage. Edinburgh Castle perches atop Castle Rock, its walls seeming to grow directly from the basalt cliffs beneath. Human settlement on this spot stretches back to the Bronze Age. Though the fortress we see today took shape across centuries of building and rebuilding. The Scottish crown jewels rest within these walls, older than their English counterparts. Cannon fire still echoes at 1 o'clock each afternoon. A tradition that once allowed ships in the harbour to set their clocks. From the ramparts, the city spreads out below, like a map drawn in stone and slate. The Royal Mile descends from the castle gates toward the Palace of Holyrood House, tracing the spine of the ancient volcanic ridge. This single street holds more history per cobblestone than most cities contain in entire districts. Narrow closes branch off at odd angles, and dark passageways that once housed the poor stacked above the wealthy in towering tenements. John Knox preached here, Mary Queen of Scots walked these stones, and the Scottish Parliament now meets where monks once gathered. Every doorway seems to guard a story, centuries in the making. Arthur's Seat rises at the Royal Mile's eastern end, the main peak of another ancient volcano that sits entirely within the city limits. This wild highland, dropped into an urban landscape, offers something few capitals can match. Hikers climb through gorse and grass to reach the summit. Just 250 meters above sea level, yet commanding views across the Firth of Forth to the north. The wind up here carries no trace of the city below. Standing on Arthur's Seat, the volcanic origins that shaped Edinburgh become clear. And the connection between land and settlement reveals itself without words. Yet between Edinburgh and Glasgow, Scotland's story did not end with ancient geology. In the lowlands between Edinburgh and Glasgow, a different kind of ambition took shape. Here in Falkirk, the industrial age left its mark on canals and ironworks that once powered an empire. Today, this region honors that legacy through monuments that bridge the gap between past and future. The Kelpies rise from the flat parkland like spirits summoned from Scottish folklore. These twin horse-head sculptures stand 30 meters tall. Their stainless steel skin reflecting clouds that drift overhead. Designed by sculptor Andy Scott, they pay tribute to the heavy horses that once hauled barges along these waterways. By night, internal lighting transforms them into glowing sentinels, visible for miles across the Forth Valley. A short distance away, the Falkirk Wheel performs a feat of engineering that seems almost magical. This rotating boat lift connects the Forth and Clyde Canal to the Union Canal, raising vessels 35 meters through the air. Before its construction in 2002, a series of 11 locks once handled this work over the course of a full day. Now the wheel completes the journey in just 15 minutes, using less energy than boiling 8 kettles of water. Standing together, these structures speak to a Scotland comfortable with reinvention. The horses remember muscle and sweat. The wheel celebrates precision and imagination. Visitors who pause here witness something rare. A place where industrial heritage meets contemporary art beneath the same wide sky. Beyond Falkirk's industrial monuments, those ancient forces carved more than mountains. They hollowed basins that would fill with water and time, creating the lochs that now define the Scottish landscape. Among them, Loch Lomond stands as the largest freshwater lake in all of Britain. Its waters stretch across 24 miles of highland terrain, holding more volume than all the lakes of England and Wales combined. The loch sits along the Highland boundary fault, that invisible line where lowland Scotland meets its wilder northern half. This geological seam explains why the southern shores spread wide and gentle, while the northern reaches narrow between steep mountain walls. 30 islands dot these waters, and some inhabited for thousands of years, others left to oak forests and wandering deer. The largest, Inchmurrin, once sheltered Scottish nobles fleeing political storms that swept the mainland. Ben Lomond rises from the eastern shore, its peak reaching over 3,000 feet into clouds that rarely lift for long. Climbers who reach the summit on clear days can see both coasts of Scotland, the Atlantic to the west, and the North Sea far to the east. Below, the loch shifts between deep blue and slate grey, depending on the mood of the sky above. Fishermen still work these waters as their families have for generations, pulling trout and salmon from depths that plunge to over 600 feet in places. North of Loch Lomond's tranquil waters, those same forces shaped more than remote highlands and windswept coasts. They also created the strategic heartland where Scottish history would be forged in battle and stone. Stirling rises at the narrow waist of Scotland, where the Highlands meet the lowlands at a crossing point so vital that whoever held it controlled the nation. This small city witnessed more decisive moments than places 10 times its size. The old streets still carry echoes of kings and warriors who understood what the land itself had always known. Stirling Castle crowns a volcanic crag that juts 250 feet above the surrounding plain. This dramatic perch gave defenders an unobstructed view of every approaching army for miles in every direction. The rock itself formed from the same molten upheavals that shaped Edinburgh's famous ridge millions of years ago. Within these walls, Mary Queen of Scots was crowned as an infant, and Scottish kings held court in the magnificent Great Hall with its towering hammer-beam roof. The Renaissance palace still displays carved figures along its facade, stone faces that have watched over the city for 500 years. The Wallace Monument stands on the nearby Abbey Craig, a Victorian tower built to honour the Guardian who turned the tide of Scottish resistance. From its crown, the view stretches across the very ground, where William Wallace defeated the English army at Stirling Bridge in 1297. The climb of 246 steps rewards visitors with a panorama that explains why this landscape mattered so deeply. Inside, the sword attributed to Wallace measures over 5 feet long, a silent witness to an age when ordinary men became legends on these contested fields. Returning to the western seaboard, few islands capture the spirit of the Inner Hebrides quite like the Isle of Mull. This rugged landmass rises from waters where Atlantic currents meet sheltered sea lochs. Mountains draped in heather give way to coastlines carved by ancient glaciers. Mull holds within its shores both vibrant harbour life and sacred ground that has drawn pilgrims for over 1,000 years. Tobermory wraps around its bay like a painting come to life. Brightly coloured buildings line the waterfront, their facades reflecting in the calm harbour waters below. Fishing boats bob gently at anchor, while seabirds wheel overhead. This small port town serves as the island's main settlement, one where narrow streets climb the hillside behind the famous seafront. The sheltered bay has welcomed vessels for centuries, offering safe harbour against the unpredictable Hebridean weather. A short ferry crossing from Mull's western shore brings visitors to the tiny island of Iona and its ancient abbey. St. Columba arrived on these shores in the year 563, establishing a monastery that would spread Christianity throughout Scotland. The present abbey church dates from medieval times, though restoration work has preserved its weathered stones. Kings of Scotland, Ireland, and Norway rest in the burial ground here, their graves marked by Celtic crosses that have stood against wind and rain for generations. Pilgrims still walk the paths worn smooth by countless feet across the ages. The crossing back to Mull reveals why monks chose this remote corner of the world. Silence settles over the water, broken only by waves against the hull. The abbey's tower shrinks against the horizon, yet its presence lingers long after the island disappears from view. In places like these, the boundary between past and present grows thin. Back on the mainland, those ancient forces found one of their most dramatic expressions in the Western Highlands, where a valley carved by ice and fire now stands as one of Scotland's most haunting landscapes. Glencoe opens before us like a wound in the earth, its steep walls rising on either side in shades of green and grey. This is a place where geology and history collide with equal weight. The mountains here do not simply stand, they loom, their presence felt long before their summits come into view. The valley floor stretches beneath peaks that were once part of a massive volcanic caldera. Millions of years ago, this ground trembled with eruptions that would dwarf anything in recorded memory. What remains is a landscape stripped down to its bones, scoured by glaciers that retreated only 10,000 years ago. Rivers still cut through the glen, carrying meltwater that once flowed beneath sheets of ice 1,000 feet thick. The Three Sisters dominate the southern wall of Glencoe. Three ridges descending from the main mountain mass, like the folds of a great stone curtain. Their Gaelic names speak to the character of this place: Bain Fada, Gia Ionak, and Ionak Dub. Each ridge catches light and shadow differently as clouds move overhead, creating patterns that shift by the hour. From the valley road, these formations appear almost architectural, as though some deliberate hand shaped them from the living rock. Hikers who venture into the hidden valley between these peaks discover a landscape that feels removed from time itself, where silence settles heavy and the modern world falls away completely. From Glencoe's haunted valley, our journey carries us north to where the Highlands reach their highest point. Fort William sits at the foot of Britain's tallest mountain. A small town that serves as the gateway to some of Scotland's most dramatic terrain. Loch Lomond stretches beside it, a sea loch that carves deep into the land. Here, the forces that shape this nation feel immediate and close at hand. Ben Nevis rises 1,345 meters above sea level, its summit often lost in thick cloud. The mountain's name comes from the Gaelic Bain Nibhaes, though scholars still debate its exact meaning. Some translate it as Venomous Mountain, others as mountain with its head in the clouds. Both interpretations capture something true about this brooding peak. The southern slopes offer a well-worn path that draws over 100,000 walkers each year. This route follows the old pony track, winding gradually upward through moorland and scree. Yet the northern face tells a different story altogether. Sheer cliffs drop nearly 700 meters, their dark rock walls attracting climbers who seek challenges few peaks in Britain can match. Snow lingers in the high gullies well into summer, a reminder that altitude changes everything here. The mountain demands respect from all who approach, regardless of the path they choose. West of Fort William, where mist clings to slopes carved by ice ages past, one structure rises from the wilderness with quiet authority. Glenfinnan sits at the head of Loch Shiel, a place where history and landscape merge into something almost mythic. Mountains press close on every side, their reflections stretching across still waters below. Here, the forces that shaped Scotland find their perfect frame. The Glenfinnan viaduct curves across this remote valley like a ribbon of stone suspended in time. 21 arches span over 300 meters of open air, each one built from concrete poured more than a century ago. Construction began in 1897, when workers hauled materials through roadless terrain to raise this monument to Victorian engineering. The curve follows the natural contour of the land, bending gently to meet the mountain slopes at either end. Steam trains still cross this viaduct today, their white plumes trailing against green hillsides and grey skies. From the viewpoint below, the locomotive appears almost toy-like against the massive spans of weathered concrete. Yet standing beneath those arches reveals their true scale, each pillar rising nearly 30 meters from the valley floor. The structure carries no plaques or monuments to its builders, only the enduring evidence of their craft visible in every precisely placed stone. Leaving the Western Highlands behind, we journey east into the wild interior, where the land rises toward Britain's rooftop. Cairngorms National Park spreads across the Eastern Highlands like a kingdom unto itself. This is the largest national park in the British Isles, a realm of high plateaus, ancient forests, and glacial valleys carved during ice ages long past. Here, the story written in Scotland's oldest rocks finds its most dramatic expression. The Cairngorm Plateau itself stands as an Arctic fragment stranded in northern Britain. 5 of Scotland's 6 highest mountains rise within the park's boundaries, their summits scoured by winds that rarely rest. Snow lingers in shadowed corries well into summer, and in the granite tors that crown these peaks have weathered 10,000 winters since the last ice retreated. Walking these heights feels less like hill walking and more like visiting another continent entirely. Below the tree line, remnants of the Great Caledonian Forest still stand in scattered pockets. Scots pines twist into shapes dictated by centuries of harsh weather, their bark glowing orange in low winter light. Red squirrels move through the branches, and red deer drift across the moorland edges at dawn. This landscape operates on rhythms older than any human calendar. Indifferent to the passage of kingdoms and empires beyond its borders. Northwest of the Cairngorms, across waters that shimmer between grey and blue, one island rises from the sea with a presence that feels almost otherworldly. The Isle of Skye sits off Scotland's northwest coast, connected to the mainland by a single bridge that seems to cross into another age entirely. Jagged ridges pierce low-hanging clouds here. Waterfalls tumble into pools so clear they appear bottomless. This is a landscape where geology and myth have become impossible to separate. The Old Man of Storr stands as the island's most recognizable sentinel. This pinnacle of ancient lava rises nearly 50 meters from a slope littered with fallen rock towers and broken spires. The formation emerged from a massive landslip thousands of years ago, when part of the cliff face simply gave way under its own weight. Local legend once held that a giant lay buried beneath the rubble, with only his thumb still visible above the earth. Hikers ascending the trail find themselves walking through hanging mist, more often than clear air. Deeper into the island, the fairy pools wait in a glen beneath the Black Quillan Mountains. Crystal water cascades through a series of small falls and rock basins carved by centuries of patient erosion. The pools glow an impossible shade of blue-green, even under grey skies. Swimmers brave enough to enter discover water cold enough to steal breath, and fed directly from the peaks above. At the western edge of Skye, Neist Point stretches into the Atlantic like a bony finger pointing toward the horizon. A white lighthouse has marked this headland since 1809, guiding vessels through waters known for sudden squalls. The cliffs here drop sharply into churning surf below. On rare, clear evenings, the Outer Hebrides appear as distant shadows, reminding visitors that Skye itself is merely one stepping stone in a vast island chain. Yet Skye holds more secrets still. For these ancient forces have shaped few places more dramatically. And the land itself seems caught mid-transformation. Beyond the famous peaks and waterfalls lie corners of the island that feel almost otherworldly. Here, the earth twists into forms that defy simple explanation. Each hidden valley and crumbling ridge adds another layer to the geological story written across this windswept isle. The Quiraing stands as one of the most remarkable landslip formations anywhere in Britain. Massive pillars of rock rise from slopes still actively shifting beneath their own weight. Walking trails wind past features with names like the Needle and the Prison. The stone monuments carved by gravity over thousands of years. Morning mist often fills the hollows here, creating scenes that seem borrowed from another age entirely. Tucked away near the village of Uig, the fairy glen presents a landscape in miniature. Cone-shaped hills rise just a few meters high, scattered across green pastures like sleeping giants beneath the grass. No signs point the way to this peculiar place, yet visitors who find it often linger for hours. The strange symmetry of these formations has inspired local legends for generations. Tales of the little people who shaped the land to suit their needs. Dunvegan Castle claims the distinction of being the oldest continuously inhabited castle in Scotland. For over 800 years, the chiefs of Clan MacLeod have called this fortress home. The castle perches on a rocky outcrop overlooking Loch Dunvegan, its walls holding treasures and relics spanning centuries. Seals often gather in the waters below, indifferent to the human history unfolding on the shores above them. Crossing back to the mainland, where three sea lochs converge. Those ancient forces have shaped more than just geology. They have created a setting so dramatic that human ambition could not resist building upon it. Eilean Castle rises from a small tidal island, its stone walls appearing to grow directly from the rock beneath. This is perhaps the most photographed castle in all of Scotland, and standing before it reveals exactly why. The first fortification appeared here in the 13th century. Built to defend against Viking raids that still terrorize these coasts. For 400 years, the Clan Mackenzie and their allies, the Macraes, held this strategic point where Loch Duich, Loch Long, and Loch Alsh meet the open sea. The castle witnessed clan warfare, political intrigue, and the rising tensions that would eventually tear Scotland apart. In 1719, English warships reduced the fortress to rubble after a failed Jacobite uprising. And for 2 centuries, it remained a romantic ruin. What visitors see today emerged from a 20-year restoration completed in 1932. Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae Gilstrap rebuilt the castle stone by stone. Guided by the vision his ancestors had left behind. A narrow footbridge now connects the island to the mainland, replacing the boat crossings of earlier centuries. Inside, clan artifacts and period furnishings recreate the atmosphere of Highland life. While outside, the mountains plunge into dark waters that reflect the castle's silhouette on still mornings. Northeast of Island Donan, those same geological forces carved one of Scotland's most dramatic features. A deep gash in the earth, now filled with dark, peat-stained waters. Loch Ness stretches for 23 miles through the Great Glen. its surface rarely still and its depths plunging to over 700 feet. More water lies hidden here than in all the lakes of England and Wales combined. The surrounding hills rise steeply from the shoreline, their slopes cloaked in pine and birch that give way to bare rock and heather higher up. Urquhart Castle commands a rocky promontory that juts into the loch near its midpoint. The ruins stand where fortifications have watched over this strategic waterway for more than 1,000 years. What remains today dates largely from the 13th to 16th centuries, though earlier structures once occupied this same headland. The Grant Tower still rises against the sky, offering views across waters that have sparked imaginations for generations. Conflict shaped this place as much as the landscape itself. The castle changed hands repeatedly during the wars of Scottish independence and later clan struggles. Government forces partially destroyed it in 1692 to prevent Jacobite use, leaving the romantic ruin that visitors find today. Stone walls now frame open sky, where great halls once hosted feasts and councils. The wind moves freely through doorways that once held heavy oak doors, barred against enemies. Returning once more to the Isle of Skye, we find the village of Portree, nestled against the eastern coast. This small capital serves as the beating heart of island life. Painted buildings cluster around a natural harbour, their facades washed in shades of pink, blue, ochre, and cream. The name itself comes from the Gaelic Port Rig, meaning King's Port, a title earned when James V anchored here in 1540. The colourful harbour draws the eye immediately upon arrival. Fishing boats rock gently against stone quays that have welcomed vessels for centuries. Behind them, those famous painted houses rise in cheerful rows, their reflections dancing on the sheltered waters below. Local fishermen still land their catches here each morning, continuing traditions that stretch back through countless generations. The scent of salt air mingles with wood smoke drifting from cottage chimneys. Portree functions as the gateway to the island's most remarkable attractions. From this harbour town, roads wind outward toward the dramatic Quiraing, the Old Man of Storr, and the fairy pools of Glen Brittle. Day trippers and wanderers alike use these colourful streets as their base camp for exploration. Yet many find themselves lingering longer than planned, caught by the slow rhythm of island time and the warmth found in local pubs after sunset. East of Portree's colourful harbour, those ancient forces find their voice in the northern Highlands, where the River Ness carves its path toward the sea. Inverness rises at this meeting point, a city shaped by the same geological drama that split the land in two. The Great Glen Fault Line runs directly beneath these streets, a wound in the earth that has never fully healed. For thousands of years, this natural crossroads has drawn settlers, traders, and kings to its banks. Inverness Castle commands the skyline from a sandstone bluff above the river. The current structure dates only to the 1840s. Yet fortifications have crowned this spot since at least the 11th century. Macbeth himself likely knew an earlier stronghold here, though the castle of Shakespeare's imagination belonged to a different age entirely. Victorian architects chose red sandstone that glows amber at sunset, giving the building a warmth that belies its defensive purpose. From the castle terrace, the city spreads out in gentle waves toward the Moray Firth. Church spires punctuate the roof lines, while the river below reflects passing clouds. The Highlands begin just beyond the last houses, their purple slopes visible on clear days. Standing here, the sense of being at a threshold becomes impossible to ignore. Everything to the south speaks of lowland Scotland, while everything to the north belongs to a wilder, older world. Northwest of Inverness, where the ancient rocks of the Highlands finally meet the sea, a small village sits tucked into the curve of Loch Broom. Ullapool rises from the water's edge in a neat grid of whitewashed buildings, its streets laid out with purpose by the British Fisheries Society in 1788. This planned settlement brought order to a wild coast, creating a foothold for commerce where previously only scattered crofts had clung to the shoreline. Today, the village remains the largest community for miles in any direction. A gateway to the Outer Hebrides and the last outpost before the road winds deeper into the empty northwest. The fishing port defines the rhythm of daily life here. Boats rest against the harbour wall at low tide, their hulls weathered by salt and storm. Gulls wheel overhead in constant motion, tracking the movements of trawlers returning with their catch. The smell of the sea hangs in the air, mixing with wood smoke from cottage chimneys on cold mornings. Local fishermen still work these waters as generations have before them, though the industry has changed with the decades. Along the waterfront, the catch of the day moves from deck to market with practiced efficiency. Langoustines, prawns, and whitefish pass through hands that know this work by instinct. The harbour serves not only local boats, but also vessels seeking shelter from Atlantic gales that sweep down from the northwest. Ferry horns sound in the early morning as the Caledonian MacBrayne ship prepares to cross the Minch towards Stornoway. In this modest port, the old ways of the Highlands persist alongside the steady pulse of modern commerce, each tide bringing fresh purpose to these ancient waters. Across the Minch from Ullapool's whitewashed harbour, few islands hold the raw beauty found on the Isle of Harris. This remote stretch of the Outer Hebrides rises from the Atlantic with a character all its own. Rocky eastern shores give way to the western coast, where something unexpected awaits. Here, the ancient Lewisian gneiss, some of the oldest rock on Earth, meets waters that glow with impossible colour. Luscantire Beach stretches along this western edge like a secret the land has kept for ages. White sand, fine as powder, curves beneath low hills covered in mature grassland. The water shifts through shades of turquoise and emerald that seem borrowed from tropical seas. Yet the cold Atlantic wind and the cry of oyster catchers remind visitors this remains wild Scotland. Tides retreat far across the flats, leaving patterns in the sand that change with every passing hour. The beach sits backed by dunes that have formed over thousands of years. Wildflowers bloom in summer, adding splashes of purple and yellow to the green slopes. Few structures interrupt the view, and on quiet days, the only sounds come from waves and wind. This isolation preserves something rare, a coastal landscape that feels untouched by the modern world. Standing here, with mountains rising inland and the Atlantic stretching west toward empty horizon, the ancient forces that shaped Scotland feel close enough to touch. North of Harris, connected by a single road across the moors, one ancient site awaits on the Isle of Lewis. This windswept corner of the Outer Hebrides holds some of the oldest continuously inhabited land in Scotland. Peat bogs stretch toward horizons where sea and sky merge into a single grey expanse. Here, on a ridge overlooking Loch Rog, stands a monument that predates Stonehenge by centuries. The Callanish stones rise from the moorland like frozen sentinels, keeping watch over forgotten rituals. 13 primary stones form a central circle, with avenues of megaliths extending outward in a rough cross pattern. Erected around 3000 BC, and these weathered pillars of Lewisian gneiss rank among the oldest rock formations visible anywhere on the planet. The grey surfaces carry patterns of white and dark banding, evidence of pressures and temperatures that shaped them nearly 3 billion years ago. Locals once called this place the False Men, believing the stones were giants turned to rock by St. Kieran for refusing to convert. Modern visitors find their own meanings in the silent arrangement. Some see astronomical alignments marking lunar cycles that repeat every 18.5 years. Others simply feel the weight of human intention preserved across 5,000 years of Atlantic storms and brief northern summers. The stones offer no explanations, only presence. And so our journey draws to a close. Yet the mist still clings to these ancient peaks, and the standing stones keep their silence as they have for millennia. Scotland reveals itself slowly, in the curve of a weathered castle wall, in the cry of gannets circling Bass Rock, in the taste of peat smoke drifting from an Islay distillery. From the Callanish stones on Lewis to the colourful harbour of Portree, from the dramatic arches of Glenfinnan Viaduct to the fairy pools beneath the Black Quillan. This land holds stories that outlast the travellers who come searching for them. Click on the video that's appearing now to continue your journey of the wonders of the world.